You know, they say the truth will set you free, but they never tell you how much it's going to cost you first. I'm sitting here in this quiet house. It's too quiet, if I'm being honest, and all I can think about is that Tuesday afternoon. The house smelled like lemon wax and pot roast. I was humming some old song I'd heard on the radio, just tidying up Arthur's desk like I'd done every week for 25 years. He was at the golf course, or so he said. I wasn't looking for trouble. Why would I? After a quarter of a century, you think you know the shape of a man's soul. Then I saw it, just a small blue receipt tucked inside the lining of his old leather briefcase. It wasn't for a golf club or a business lunch. It was for a jewelry set. Not the kind you buy your wife of 2 decades for a Tuesday surprise. This was delicate, expensive, and the date on the bottom? It was the same day he told me he had to work late for the fall audit. I remember my heart didn't race at first. It just felt like it turned into a piece of lead in my chest. I walked to the kitchen and dropped my favorite teacup, the one my mother gave me. It shattered into 100 white pieces on the linoleum. And as I stared at those shards, I realized my entire life, the birthdays, the anniversaries, the lean years and the fat ones, it was all just as broken as that cup. The locks weren't changed that day, but the key to my heart didn't fit anymore. I stood there listening to the clock tick on the wall, and I realized I didn't even know the man I had shared a bed with since 1998. Let's go back a bit. I want you to understand why this hurts so much. You see, Arthur and I weren't just a couple, we were a team. Or at least that's the story I told myself every morning while I fried his eggs exactly the way he liked them, over easy, just a pinch of pepper. We met in the summer of '97. I was working at the library and he was a young accountant with a smile that could melt the frost off a winter window. We didn't have much back then. Our first apartment was so small you had to step into the hallway just to change your mind. But we had a dream. "We're building an empire, Grace," he'd tell me, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Just you and me against the world." I believed him. I poured everything I had into that empire. When he wanted to start his own firm, I took the night shifts at the hospital to keep us afloat. I wore the same winter coat for 6 years so he could afford the suits he needed to look the part. I didn't mind. I thought I was investing in us. We had our son, Leo, and life got busier. The house got bigger, the cars got newer, but the foundation, I thought it was solid stone. I remember the 20th anniversary party. He stood up in front of 50 people, raised a glass of expensive champagne, and called me my anchor. He told everyone that he wouldn't be half the man he was without me. I felt so proud that night. I looked at him and saw a man of integrity, a man who honored his vows. I remember thinking, "We made it, Grace. All the hard work, all the sacrifices, it was worth it." But looking back now, I see the things I chose to ignore. The way he started guarding his phone like it was a state secret. the business trips that seemed to happen more and more often. I told myself I was being a supportive wife. I told myself that jealousy was for young girls who didn't trust their partners. I gave him my youth. I gave him my energy. I raised our son to respect him. I thought we were heading into our golden years together, ready to watch the sunset from the porch swings of our lives. I didn't know the sun had already gone down, and I was just standing in the dark, waiting for a light that was never coming back on. 25 years is a long time to live a lie. It's 9,125 days of waking up next to a stranger and calling him honey. It's a lot of pot roasts and a lot of lemon wax. And all it took was one little blue receipt to turn all those years into dust. It's funny how once the blindfold is ripped off, you start seeing things that were right in front of you for years. You start realizing that betrayal isn't always a sudden explosion. Most of the time, it's a slow leak, a drip, 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 until you're drowning in your own living room. After I found that receipt, I didn't scream. I didn't throw his clothes out on the lawn. Not yet. I played the part. I wanted to see if I was crazy. I wanted to see if I could find a reason to doubt my own eyes. But once you know what to look for, the truth is everywhere. It started with the phone. Arthur used to leave it on the nightstand, face up, but lately it stayed in his pocket. Even when he showered, he'd take it into the bathroom, the steam blurring the screen where he was typing away. If it rang, he didn't answer it. He'd just glance at it, flip it over, and say, "Just work, Grace. It can wait." Then there was the way he looked at me. Or rather, the way he stopped looking at me. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? I'd spend all day making the house perfect. I'd get my hair done. I'd wear that blue dress he used to love. And he'd walk right past me like I was a piece of furniture he'd grown tired of. "You're quiet tonight, Arthur," I'd say, handing him his tea. "Just tired, Grace. Big merger coming up," he'd mutter, eyes fixed on the television. It wasn't just him, though. That was the part that really started to sting. Our son, Leo, and his wife, Sarah, they started acting different, too. You'd think a daughter-in-law would be an ally, but Sarah always had a way of making me feel like a relic. She started coming over and suggesting things. "Mom," she'd say, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that tastes like copper, "don't you think this house is getting to be too much for you? All these stairs, and Arthur is so busy. Maybe you should think about downsizing, something managed." Managed. That's a polite word for out of the way, isn't it? I noticed the way she and Arthur would whisper in the hallway when they thought I was in the garden. I'd catch fragments of sentences. "She's getting forgetful," or "it would be easier for everyone." I wasn't forgetful. I remembered every birthday. I remembered where I put the spare keys. I remembered the exact date on that jewelry receipt. But they needed me to be confused. It's easier to betray a woman if you can convince the world she's lost her mind. The cuts got deeper. Arthur started staying away for weekends, claiming client retreats in the city. I'd check the bank statements, the ones he thought I didn't look at because I don't understand finances, and I'd see the charges: fine dining for two, boutique hotels. I'd sit at this very table late at night staring at those numbers. Every charge was a slap in the face. 25 years of saving coupons, of choosing the generic brand so we could put more into his business. And he was spending my life's blood on silk sheets and vintage wine for someone who didn't know the first thing about his empire. I remember one night he came home late, smelling of a perfume that wasn't mine. It was something floral and young. He kissed my cheek, a dry, mechanical gesture. And I asked him, "Arthur, are you happy?" He paused on the banister. He didn't even turn around. "I'm successful, Grace. In this world, that's the same thing." That was the night I stopped crying. The sadness was still there, tucked away in the corners of my heart, but it was being replaced by something colder, something sharper. I realized then that I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was an obstacle. To him, to Leo, and to Sarah, I was just a line item on a ledger that they were looking to balance. I watched them for months. I watched the way they looked at my jewelry, my mother's silver, this house. They weren't waiting for me to grow old with them. They were waiting for me to disappear so they could divide the spoils. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was realizing that my son, the boy I carried, the man I shielded from his father's temper, was in on it. He wasn't just watching his father stray, he was helping him pack the bags. The tension in this house was like a wire stretched so tight you could hear it hum. Every meal was a performance. Every "how was your day" was a lie. I was waiting for the moment they would finally try to break me. I didn't have to wait long. It was my 60th birthday, the day I thought we would celebrate a lifetime. Instead, it was the day they decided I didn't belong in my own life anymore. 60 years. You'd think a woman deserves a bit of peace on her diamond birthday. I had spent the morning baking my own cake. Arthur said he was too tied up at the office to order one, and Sarah said she forgot the bakery's number. I didn't mind the baking. It gave my hands something to do besides shake. That evening, they all gathered here, Arthur, Leo, and Sarah. They brought a bottle of wine, the cheap kind, the kind you buy for people you don't plan on staying long with. We sat in the dining room, the one with the chandelier Arthur bought me after his first big promotion. The air was thick. You could have cut it with a bread knife. I served the roast, and for 30 minutes we played the game. We talked about the weather, we talked about Leo's new car, but nobody looked me in the eye. Then Sarah cleared her throat. She looked at Arthur, gave him a little nod, and then turned to me. "Mom," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I pulled it back before she could make contact. "We've been talking about that incident last week with the stove." I stared at her. "What incident, Sarah?" "The one where you left the gas on for 3 hours," Arthur chimed in, his voice practiced and smooth, like a lawyer presenting a closing argument. "Grace, honey, we're worried. The house, it's a lot, and your memory, it's not what it was." I hadn't left the gas on. I knew it, and they knew it. It was a lie manufactured in the dark. I looked at my son, Leo. "Is that what you think, Leo? That I'm losing my mind?" Leo looked at his plate. He couldn't even give me the dignity of a glance. "Dad says you've been acting paranoid, Mom, talking about receipts that don't exist, hiding things. We just want you to be safe. There's a lovely community out in the valley, high-end, medical staff on site." The accusation wasn't just about my mind, it was about my life. They weren't just asking me to move, they were trying to declare me incompetent. Arthur wanted a divorce without the mess of a settlement, and Leo wanted his inheritance early to cover his mounting debts. They had traded my sanity for their convenience. "I found the receipt for the sapphire necklace, Arthur," I said quietly. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. "The necklace you bought for that girl in the city, the one you've been seeing for 3 years. Arthur didn't flinch. He just sighed, a long, weary sound of a man burdened by a difficult child. "See, this is what we mean, the delusions. Grace, there is no necklace, there is no girl. You're imagining things again." That was the moment the bridge burned. I realized they weren't just betraying our past, they were stealing my reality. They had a plan. They had papers in a folder on the sideboard. I'd seen them earlier. Power of attorney, commitment forms. They thought they could gaslight me into a locked room so they could sell this house and walk away with the empire I helped build. "You're tired, Mom," Leo said, his voice cracking just a little. "Let's just sign the papers and we can get you settled. It's for the best." I looked around that table. My husband of 25 years, my only child. They looked at me like I was a problem to be solved, a ghost haunting a house they already considered theirs. The betrayal was final. It wasn't just a hidden affair anymore. It was a conspiracy of the heart. I stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just picked up my plate and walked it to the sink. "I think you all should leave," I said, my voice as cold as the January wind. "Grace, don't be difficult," Arthur started, rising from his chair. "Leave," I repeated, "before I show you exactly how sane I am. I've lived in this house for 20 years, Arthur. I know where every vent is. I know where every cent is. And I know exactly where you keep the files you don't want the IRS to see." The color drained from Arthur's face. For the first time in 25 years, I saw him afraid of me. Sarah tried to speak, but Arthur grabbed her arm. He knew that the quiet, supportive wife had been keeping a ledger of her own. They left that night. They left me in my quiet house with my cold cake and my broken heart. But as I sat here in the dark, I realized the breaking point wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the truth. The silence that followed their departure wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that settles in after a storm has wiped the slate clean. I sat here for 3 days. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't open the curtains. I just listened to the house breathe. Arthur tried to come back once. He pounded on the door, shouting about his property and his rights. I didn't even go to the window. I just sat here, sipping my tea, and eventually his car sped away. He thought he had the upper hand because he had the money and the lawyers. He forgot that for 25 years I was the one who managed the mundane details of our life. You see, Arthur always thought I was just Grace, the woman who kept the house clean and the dinner hot. He never realized that an accountant's wife learns a few things about numbers. He thought he was being clever with his shell companies and his consulting fees. But I was the one who organized his home office. I was the one who filed the boring receipts. This is my ledger. It isn't filled with recipes for pot roast. It's filled with every offshore transfer, every business expense that was actually a vacation with his mistress, and every penny he diverted from our joint accounts into his private stash. I'd been documenting it for years, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because deep down I think I knew this day would come. I was protecting myself, even when I didn't want to admit I needed protection. But here's the twist, the thing that even Leo didn't know. You remember how I told you I worked the night shifts to start his firm, how I put every cent I had into his empire. Well, Arthur was so arrogant that he never looked at the original incorporation papers from 22 years ago. He was so busy trying to look like the big boss that he didn't notice the fine print. To save on taxes back then, he put the majority share of the holding company in my name. He thought it was a clever legal loophole. He thought I'd never understand it, and he'd eventually move it back when the time was right. But he got distracted, he got greedy, and he forgot. I don't just live in this house, Arthur. I own the firm. Every desk, every computer, every cent in the operating account belongs to me. While he was busy trying to put me in a managed home, he was actually working for me. When I showed the documents to his board of directors yesterday, the ones he'd been lying to for years, they didn't see a confused old woman. They saw a woman who held their paychecks in her hand. By the time the sun went down, Arthur was stripped of his title. He didn't just lose a wife, he lost his identity. As for Leo, that was the hardest part, my own flesh and blood. I called him this morning. I told him I'd settled his debts. I told him the house in the valley was paid for, but not for me. I told him if he ever wanted to see a dime of his inheritance, he'd have to go there and live in the managed care he thought was good enough for his mother. I told him he could stay there and think about what it means to be a son. It's a hollow victory in a way. I'm 60 years old and my family is a collection of ghosts and legal filings. But for the first time in 25 years, when I look in the mirror, I don't see Arthur's wife or Leo's mother. I see Grace, and Grace is doing just fine. They say that time is a thief. They say it steals your beauty, your strength, and your memories. But I've learned that time is actually a teacher. It just takes its sweet time delivering the lesson. I'm sitting here now, and the house is finally truly quiet. No more whispers in the hallway, no more heavy footsteps of a man who didn't want to be here. Just the sound of the wind in the oaks and the kettle starting to whistle. People ask me, "Grace, how can you be so calm after all that? Aren't you angry?" I was angry. I was afire for a long time, but anger is a heavy thing to carry, and my back is tired enough as it is. What I feel now isn't anger, it's clarity. If I could sit you down across from me, really sit you down and hold your hand, I'd tell you this: never mistake a woman's silence for ignorance, and never mistake her kindness for weakness. We see, we hear, we remember. We hold the world together with invisible threads, and if you pull those threads too hard, the whole tapestry comes apart in your hands. To the young women listening, I want to say, love with your whole heart, yes. Be a partner, build that empire, but keep a corner of your soul just for yourself. Keep a ledger that only you can read, not out of spite, but out of respect for the woman you are before you're anyone's wife or mother. Your worth isn't tied to how well you serve a man who doesn't see you. And to the families out there, don't discard your elders like old furniture just because the fabric is a little worn. We are the keepers of the stories. We are the ones who know where the foundations are buried. When you try to erase us, you only end up erasing the very ground you're standing on. Arthur is gone, Leo is learning, and I am here. I lost 25 years to a lie, but I've gained the rest of my life for the truth. It's a trade I'd make again, even with the heartbreak, because there is no dignity in a comfortable lie. There is only power in the uncomfortable truth. The ledger is closed now, the debts are paid, and for the first time in a very long time, I think I'll go for a walk in my garden and just breathe. It's a beautiful afternoon, isn't it?